Well, it's that time of year again. Maybe you're buying your teenager their very first cell phone as a Christmas present. Maybe your contract is up and it's time to upgrade. Or maybe you're one of the less fortunate who just so happened to drop their phone on the ground and break it, uh, drop it in the river, or drop it in the toilet, you name it. But anyways, one thing's for sure, you gotta go buy a new phone. There's so many makes and models to choose from, but in hindsight, it all really comes down to one thing. Whether you prefer iPhone or you prefer Android. Well, you see, when you walk into the store and you're determined to buy a phone, one thing's for sure. You want a good phone, and you deserve a good phone. Or he or she deserves a good phone. Whatever. But anyways, the problem is competitors are persuading people into buying inferior devices. The biggest example of this is Apple. And with that, you probably have a pretty good idea of where this is going. In the long run, Android is the superior make as compared to iPhone and should be chosen over the latter. Let's talk about some benefits of owning an Android instead of an iPhone. The first thing you're thinking about when you're selecting a phone is probably the cost. You're going to want something cheaper, right? Especially if you're on a budget. Well, when you're looking towards more of a budget purchase, Android is the way to go. You can get a pretty decent Android phone that does most of what you probably expect it to do and want it to do for around $200. Whereas a top of the line or really just decent iPhone comes out nowadays for probably $1,000. I mean, unless you're not on a budget, who wants to do that? Now let's talk about durability. iPhones are notorious for absolutely shattering over the slightest mistake. You'll drop it on the ground and boom, it's done. Especially if you don't have a case. Maybe if you had a case, maybe you'd have better luck. But overall, Androids are way more durable, even without a case. You could drop it on the ground, and even without a case, it would still be fine. In fact, many Android phones nowadays are claiming to be shatterproof and having unbreakable screens and even waterproof, which iPhones seriously lack in. Now, Androids, they can handle most environments. iPhones, not really. iPhones are more developed for a more singular environment. And in more rougher environments, they're more likely to break. However, you can bring an Android with you in most environments, whether it's city or country or bad weather or the mountains or whatever. The chance of you breaking it or getting it damaged is a lot less likely. And also, as a bonus, you're more likely to get signal in a rural area with an Android. Now, let's talk about availability. If you're looking for a phone that is iOS, the operating system of every device made by Apple, let's face it, you're restricted to an Apple device. Only Apple makes devices and releases devices that have the iOS operating system. Either way, if iOS is a specific specification you want, then you're locked into Apple. You have no choice. Whereas Android is not exactly the device itself, but Android more refers to the operating system of the phone. Android is offered by numerous different manufacturers, and it gives you a whole variety of devices to choose from. Manufacturers like Samsung, Motorola, Google, LG, and Asus, they all take the code for Android, and they will whip it and they will make it into something of their own, and they will put it in their phones to be released to the public. While the interface may look different on all of their phones, it's still Android, just with their own twist. In addition, you can find Android on a lot of devices nowadays. It's not just limited to phones. You can find Android can be found on tablets, smartwatches, smart TV adapters, pretty much any smart device you come across nowadays. It'll most likely have some form of Android loaded onto it. Now, usability. For the real techie people, this is a big one. iOS is a very closed, very proprietary, if I said that right, operating system. You can't really change much with it. You can't really dig too far into it. It's very limited. The user is very limited to what they can customize, to what they can view on their phone. Whereas Android, you can pretty much, on an Android, you can do what you can with a PC on an Android. It took years for Apple to finally release an open file system for users to access, and even that's restricted. Whereas with Androids, you can operate it like any computer and dig into the deepest of configurations and do whatever you please with it. In the end, it's basically what you might call an open source device. Even Apple lacks in physical features. They removed the headphone jack, whereas, well, a lot of Android devices did remove their headphone jack. However, one manufacturer, Samsung, chose to not remove their headphone jack. So if you want an Android phone with the headphone jack, a Samsung Galaxy is one of your options. Now, obviously, as you can see, if you want a good phone, go with Android. It's simply superior in many ways than I've mentioned. And all you have to do is go meet with your service provider and ask for an Android, and they will help you get your plan arranged with an Android instead of that pesky iPhone you might have in your pocket. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you take my advice. Bye, y'all.